Arizona and Arizona State headed to the Big 12, the best conference ever to do expansion. This is Locked On Baylor.
You are Locked On Baylor, your daily podcast on the Baylor Bears, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Happy Friday, everybody. Welcome into Locked On Baylor. I'm Drake Toll from Sports. That is Harper Mayfield from the Baylor Lariat. Thank you for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Harper, the announcement impending, right? At the time of recording, we don't know officially, but it's coming. Arizona and Arizona State to the Big 12. It's going to happen. And it makes me think of three things. Number three, that would be British colonialization. Number two, manifest destiny.
Right.
Number one, Big 12 expansion. Nobody's done it better. Nobody has done assimilation better than this. And now the Big 12 will survive. The Pac-12 will die. And it feels like, your take at least, is that this conference is the place to be.
Yeah, absolutely. You look like historically, like you were talking about, and we know that typically empires last for about 1,000 years. And so the Big 12 has a lot of time left.
999 years left to go, baby.
So, we're just getting started, really. And I think when you look at the Big 12, especially since Yormark has been hired, which I feel like is kind of the defining change point for so much of what has happened recently with expansion and stuff, really nobody has done it better. I mean, obviously, Texas and OU to the SEC kicked off the major realignment bug that we've seen go around, and USC and UCLA to the Big Ten was kind of the start of the knock on the door for the Pac-12 that, hey, maybe this is not going so well. People didn't write the Pac-12 off then. Everybody had already written the Big 12 off. And here we are, having picked up four schools that are very excited to be here. Say what you will about those four schools. They're very excited to be here. There's no denying that. And then recently, the Colorado ad, the ad of the Arizona schools, Utah, whether their Twitter fans like it or not, and boy, do they not like it, will end up in the Big 12 too. Nobody has been as proactive about it as the Big 12. Granted, a lot of other conferences will tell you that they don't need to be proactive about it. Hello, ACC. In the next couple of years, it will have run out for you. Florida State has already declared their intention to leave. We'll get to that in a little bit. And yet nobody has been as proactive about seeking out new members as has the Big 12. And that has been to their credit, I think.
Open for business. That is one of the slogans that's been used the last couple of years. And the Pac-12 seemed like it was going to be open for business, right? They wanted nothing to do with Big 12 teams, but looked at expansion, especially as their team started to leave. And to me, it's tough to make a case that puts the Big 12 over the SEC and the Big 10 from a revenue standpoint, surely. And it's tough to say that this is the place to be necessarily in college athletics outside of the word fun. But there's a blueprint there for money down the road. There's a blueprint there for the entertainment value. But you highly rate this conference, not just an expansion, but overall. Why?
Mm-hmm. Well, one last point on the expansion part here. I think that's important to look at when you look at like the Big Ten and you say, oh, well, I want the $80 to $100 million that all of these teams are getting from their TV deal. Hey, me too. I would love $80 to $100 million from a TV deal. But what people aren't seeing about the Big Ten TV deal is that it's not structured to add teams beyond the ones that it already has. So if you were to get, say, an Oregon and a Washington in the Big Ten, they have to come in at a pretty steep discount. Does Oregon and Washington want to come in at a steep discount? No, they value themselves too much for that. And nobody else wants to give up their money. That's the thing people don't think about. You want to ask Michigan to give up $20 million so that you can join the conference and be their new best buddy? They're not going to do that for you. They don't care about you. But also, I think when you look from a just holistic collegiate athletics standpoint, you talk about all of the sports that quote unquote matter from a media standpoint, from a revenue standpoint. You look at football and basketball. The Big 12 has been the best in basketball. Now, the SEC still dominant in football, but the Big 12 is putting themselves in a position to compete for the title of we're the best conference in X sport across the board. Now, football, probably not. I'm going to hand up on that one. Probably not. The SEC and the Big Ten are really good. It's going to take us a little bit to get there. But every other sport you look at, there is a path to say, hey, in the next couple of years, the Big 12 is going to be a really good conference for X. And I think that is more valuable than people think. Because when you think about college football, you think about the SEC. And in the past couple of years, when you've thought about college basketball, you think about the Big 12. And I think that matters more than a lot of people are giving it credit for.
Yeah, there's a legitimate chance. And this is so true. But while football is the back burner, the Big 12 could be the best conference in men's basketball, women's basketball, volleyball's on the table, softball guaranteed already as you expand west in this conference. Baseball's right there for you. There's a way for this league to be the best league in every sport, not named football. And I think it's going to stay that way. I think the SEC is still going to dominate football. But look at the Big Ten. There are holes in the Big Ten when it comes to basketball even. Right? They like to scream that they're the best conference, but the Big 12 has dominated that league so much. Even in football, who made it further last season? The Big 10 or the Big 12? TCU in a national championship game, beating the Big 10 champion to get to that point. The Big 12 has shown that it can compete on a massive level with anybody else in pretty much any sport. Now with Arizona and Arizona State too, how does that dynamic improve? Or if you listen to yesterday's show, how is it kind of a neutral, right? That these are two programs that are not very historic. They have combined for 2 New Year's Six Bowls, which is what Baylor has gone to in the last 4 years. How do you really pitch outside of maybe some TV markets and branding and big schools? But pitching Arizona State to me isn't like an Oregon. I think Oregon's still so much. They're the big dog in this fight.
Right. And people think about Oregon that way because of Nike money. It's Phil Knight University. We've known that for a long time. But where I think Arizona and Arizona State have value is being the 1 and 2 flagship schools in their state. There's not any other 2 schools in that state that you think about when you think of, when someone tells you, I went to school in Arizona, your first 2 guesses are always U of A and ASU. Grand Canyon's a lot of fun, but hey, that's not what we're dealing with.
Northern Arizona Lumberjacks.
Oh, yes. The Chandler Gilbert Community College Coyotes for
Woodbat baseball team.
Yes, indeed. Anyway, so you look at schools like that, and you also look at, not necessarily the most storied football programs, but have had success in prior conferences in the Pac-12. We've seen really good football seasons from Arizona State. And then you look at the other sports, Arizona State, historic baseball team, Arizona, historic basketball team. One of those schools that you talk about and you say, is it a blue blood? Is it not? I don't really know. And I think that there's just a lot of additional value there when you talk about, again, the holistic competition standpoint. Very good at Olympic sports, both of these schools churn out Olympians that are on the international stage. Swimming, yes. I have several friends that have swam at both of these institutions, very good programs. And so, again, when you look at the larger picture with all the sports that we're competing in, I don't think it can be underestimated what these 2 teams provide, even if it's not necessarily in the big time sport that is football.
Yeah. Well, now what you have is the whole poaching of the Pac-12 with the heart ripped out. Where does everybody else land, from Stanford to Cal, from Oregon to Washington? And your take is that the Big 12 doesn't need Oregon and Washington, and that maybe that's a wrong step in expansion. You know what the right step in expansion is? To listen to Locked On Baylor every single day. Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. It is your team, and it's every day. Oh, boy. When I tell you about what I'm excited about today, you will not be shocked. It's LinkedIn Talent Solutions. I've been telling you about LinkedIn Talent Solutions. When you think I need talent, I feel talentless, I have a solution. LinkedIn. It's crazy to me that you can just be like, oh, dude, I need to hire somebody. And all you have to do, you don't have to put a flyer up. So many people are doing flyers still. So many people are buying these Facebook ads. No. You be 100% certain you get the right candidate, a qualified candidate at LinkedIn Jobs. They help you find the right people faster, and it's free. Purple hashtag hiring frame. And then you go and you spread the word that you're hiring. You go to your LinkedIn profile, say, hey, everybody, I'm hiring. And they say, well, I'm going to apply. Simple tools, screening questions, make it easy to focus on the right candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you want to hire. That's why small businesses rate LinkedIn number one in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. Add the right team member, the right fit. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That is linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Keep in mind with that, terms and conditions do apply. Harper, for some reason, you think Oregon and Washington wouldn't be a good fit, wouldn't belong in the Big 12. The Big 12 shouldn't go after these teams. Why is that?
There's a couple reasons. And one, I think the full product of what they're putting out there, and two, the cultural fit that was so important to them when the Big 12, when people were talking about the Big 12 coming to the Pac-12, Oregon and Washington were some of the schools that said we would never associate with them. We're not like them. They're not like us. They can stay over there in their little backwater, and we're going to sit in our ivory tower over here.
Flyover country.
Yes. And certainly an awkward fit from that standpoint. Now, I'm sure if we were, if they're on a sinking ship and we were the last boat, would they jump on? I don't know. It doesn't seem likely that they would. They would choose to drown. But also what I think is difficult about Oregon and Washington, they love to tell Big 12 fans when they say, hey, we want Oregon and Washington in the Big 12. They say, oh, no, we're much too good for you. Our programs have made the playoff. We're the two Pac-12 teams that have made the playoff. And, for all the good that did the Pac-12, right? Oregon and Washington having success. What has it done for the Pac-12? Cast them off into oblivion. You look at Oregon and the Phil Knight money is appealing. You know what other program is also entirely backed by Phil Knight is Oregon State. Where is Oregon State going? Probably the Mountain West. I'm so sorry, Beavs. But yeah, so you look at those two teams, and Washington made the playoff, and it was really kind of a fun underdog story. They got up 7-0 on Alabama, and they didn't score again.
Yeah, true.
Woo! Cincinnati played a closer game against Alabama than that. We've got them. Okay. You can play that game all day. You can play it. You can play those playoff games 10 more times. The result's probably the same all 10 times. So they're going to talk to you about their success. They're going to talk to you about their markets. And I think what the Big 12 is going for more so than these large markets is the places that are passionate about college sports. When I think of places that are passionate about college sports, I don't think about Seattle. I don't really think about Eugene, Oregon either. You think about the towns like Provo and Manhattan, Kansas, and
Ames, Iowa.
Yeah, exactly.
Lubbock, Texas.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the smaller towns that are centered around the school. Stillwater, Oklahoma, places like that where people, in Stillwater, they eat, sleep, and breathe Cowboys. So in Seattle, not so much. And I think that's where you run into kind of the clunky fit with what the Big 12 is becoming and what Oregon and Washington are choosing to be at this point. They view themselves as those SEC Big 10, quote, power programs that allegedly we don't have. And past few years, they just have been okay.
Yeah.
They've been okay. And yeah, everybody remembers, Marcus Mariota and teams like that. But what great successes Oregon had since then? They're really good at track. True. The Dana Altman teams were fun for a little bit in basketball, but they play on that hideous court. And if I'm being really honest, I do not want to watch Big 12 basketball on that basketball court. Ugh. So there's a lot of things that I think Oregon and Washington will tell you that they are really, really good for in terms of why you should want us. And I just don't know if that's the case.
And I do want to save you a little bit here for the people that are typing right now. Oh, Cincinnati's not known for football. Oh, Orlando's not known for its college allegiance. But you've already made the point that teams like Houston, Cincinnati, UCF might not be great fits in the Big 12 for what the conference is trying to go toward. Mm-hmm. And Salt Lake City certainly applies to that too, as the Utah fans are screaming into the void that they also want to sink. They don't want to jump into a lifeboat. They just want to go down with the ship for zero reason. Washington has recently, there have been reports come out that they have seen the $10 million figure that travel would cost to be in the Big 12, and that's why they're hesitant. Whereas if you go to the Big 10 and you're flying to go play a game against Rutgers, if you're going to Chicago, right, these flights are going to be just as far in the Big 10, and it's going to be just as expensive to travel in every sport that's not football, because your baseball team's got to go a lot of places. Your basketball team certainly does too. You're going to have to cough up that money. And guess who's not making a ton of money when compared to other teams the Big 12 wants to go to an expansion? Washington. Right? They're not selling out every game. And I've seen Washington basketball games. There's nobody shows up to this stuff. No way they're making revenue off this jazz. And now the Big 12's barking to them. The one, I don't circle Washington as a team that I target, but Oregon, man, I don't know if I just can't get past the fact that Oregon has one of the most predominant brands in college football for a team that truly hasn't done much in the history of college. They've had some blips, but they're not a dominant force in this sport and haven't really been in almost a decade now. And so I think that they've never made a college football playoff, which is wild.
They made the one. One of those early ones.
Was
with
the
Mariota.
first one? Maybe it was the first one. Yep, there you go. One college football playoff, nicely done, Oregon. Is that what you hang your hat on here? You know, Oklahoma's made what, 5?
Yeah, TCU's made one. I don't really care for TCU either, but hey, we got to give it to them.
So, give me Oregon though. Why not? Why I get why not Washington, but truly, would you really, if the opportunity's there and Oregon says I want to come to your conference, would you say no?
See, it's tricky because you look at the things you're talking about with the brand and with what Oregon is to like just the casual observer. You ask them to name good football programs, they're probably going to say Oregon just because of what they have been the last few years. And if it comes down to, we're the last lifeboat on a sinking ship and they do decide to jump in, I probably would take them. But if it's us or ambiguity for a little bit, I don't think that they would take us. And that's if they want, I think they would choose to sink, and it's not going to be our choice whether or not to take them. And if that's the choice they're going to make, then they're probably not a long-term Big 12 member. And that's where I think you run the risk of hurting the conference a little bit more, is bringing them in just for them to bounce in a couple years when they see an opportunity to leave for what they feel is a better opportunity, which I think would happen.
Speaking of opportunity, Florida State has an opportunity to bounce from the ACC, and they will likely do it. They've already made it very clear that they feel as though fraud has been committed, so they can leave with a pretty much clean slate. And you think the Big 12 is the best fit for them? You seem like you like the Big 12 here, Harper. Let's get into that here on Locked On Baylor, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. That is your team, and it's every single day. Oh boy, when I tell you that my motor runs on eBay Motors. I have a 96. I think it's a 96. I can't tell. It's an Impala. It sits right out there, and it makes a lot of noise. And it needed a lot of parts replaced. Technically totaled for sure. Did we drive without oil in that car for a while? Yeah, we did. Does it still make weird noises when you drive it? Most of the time, yes. But what I did is I went to ebaymotors.com. I found the right parts, the right fit. It's just like sports. You want the right parts, you want the right fit to win. Last night I watched the Jets and the Browns. I loved it. Welcome back football. They have the right parts. They have the right fit. I bet on the game at FanDuel. I had a blast. And I have a blast every time I look at my car and I think about eBay Motors. Go to eBay Motors right now. eBay's guaranteed fit. You get the best fit first time around. You add your car to the My Garage part, and you get your money back if the part doesn't fit. It's just like in sports. You need the right part. 122 million parts to choose from. You'll be back in the game in no time. It's easy to bring home a win when the right parts are there. Get those right parts. Get the right fit. Get the right prices at ebaymotors.com. Let's ride. eBay's guaranteed fit. Only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only, and all terms and conditions do apply. Harper, you think that Florida State belongs in the Big 12. Why?
I do. And, a couple of years ago, some of our older listeners may remember that Florida State the Big 12 had a chance to try and court Florida State and ultimately did not choose to attend. They were like, hey, it's a little too much for us. We're happy where we are. We don't really have anything going on in that part of the country right now. Back when college football conferences were about where you were. That was what it was about. It was about, hey, we're in this section. The SEC is over here, and the ACC is over here. That is no longer the case. Now, you look at what the SEC has done, what the Big Ten has really, they were the first conference to take a big leap, go grab some California schools. Now we've extended all the way to the East Coast with Florida. Obviously, West Virginia has been over there, and there's been talk of, schools like UConn and things like that. And Florida State, a program that, like Oregon, is one that you name when someone asks you, hey, what are good college football programs? I don't know any. People will say Florida State. Whether they're good that year or not, it's a team that people know. And they've had pretty much as much success as Oregon in the past couple of years. One college football playoff, one Heisman winner. It's effectively the same program, just
a national championship 10 years ago under Jimbo Fisher.
They sure did. And they just don't wear the crazy uniforms. And so that's why people like Oregon, because they wear highlighters instead of wearing maroon and gold. And that's fair. But Florida State also, additionally, when we look back at that Big Ten deal, if they're going to look at the Big Ten, they have to realize that they're not going to get the money that they think that they're worth. And if they want that money, other teams aren't going to pony it up for them. You can ask for it from Rutgers. Rutgers is just happy to be there. They're not going to give it to you. They're holding on as long as they can. The SEC, they've already got Florida. Florida's not going to be happy with you joining the SEC because that's their little thing. They're the Florida school in the SEC. And as soon as you come in, they're not. They're maybe the second Florida school in the ACC because, we've seen how bad both of these teams could be in recent years in like interim coaching situations. Things have gotten rough down there in the Sunshine State. And so the Big 12, obviously we went and picked up UCF. We've dipped our toes into the water in Florida. And I think Florida State is the logical next step for us there because they're a storied football program, which is what we're looking for, really. We talked about that being what we lack is those big-time football brands. Florida State is that. They're a holistic competitor. They're good at a lot of things. And I think they slide right into what we talked about earlier with the town that's built kind of around the school. Obviously, Tallahassee, a little bit larger, but it functions largely around Seminole athletics. And I think that's a big part of, again, what the Big 12 is doing. You look at all these schools and you say, the people that care about this team really, really care. It's not like, oh man, I might go catch the state game later. That's appointment viewing down there in Florida. And so I think all those factors add up to being what all these new Big 12 schools are and what the Big 12 envisions itself becoming. And again, if the Big 12 wants to become that third power conference, as we're trending towards, a school like Florida State is necessary.
And yes, if you're the Big 12, you certainly, if Florida State calls tomorrow, you kick somebody out for that. You say, look, Houston, it's been fun, but we got Florida State here. If that's what it comes down to, you do it. Problem is, the Big Ten's also going to want Florida State. The SEC surely will call them. If all 3 of these leagues are putting in phone calls to a Florida State who's already leaving the ACC, why would they choose the Big 12 and not the SEC, not the Big Ten? Because it seems like, unlike Utah, they would probably like to piss off Florida, and the Big Ten could offer certainly more money than the Big 12.
Yeah, well, not under their current contract because they would have to restructure the whole thing, and not everybody's going to want to lose money to take on a school that is, again, really far away. And apparently not every school likes travel costs. Hello, Washington. And so you get a situation like that where a big player in the Big Ten says, I'm not losing my money for them. An Ohio State, maybe, a Wisconsin, something like that. And they say, don't really want to bow out on $30-40 million so that we can add another team here. I'm happy with the 2 California schools. And that deal doesn't go through. Now, the SEC, their deal's in place for much longer than the Big Ten's is, so they have a little bit more flexibility. The ACC has 13 years left on their TV deal, but it's not a very good deal, which is why Florida State wants out. If it was a good deal, the ACC would be just fine, but they're just the Pac-12 on a slower schedule. It's all going to start to fall apart. It's just a matter of when. And the Big 12, again, has been very forward-thinking, has been very willing to capitalize on any team's slight ounce of panic. Colorado felt like they were going to get left behind. We went and grabbed them up before they could. The Arizonas were like, man, that could be us in a couple days, maybe a couple weeks. Who knows? We went and picked them up before it could. And before anybody else had really had a chance to think about it, we have a chance to get a hold of Florida State. I think being proactive about that and coming to them with the deal and saying, hey, this is what we can give you right now, instead of having to wait 3 to 4 years for a restructured Big Ten contract or the SEC to have a spot open up, we can give this to you right now, and it's X amount of money. I think that has to be appealing for a school like Florida State that's clearly unhappy with their situation.
Yeah, and growing pains. You talk about the Big 12 adding now with what Arizona State would bring, and if you throw Utah into the fold, it's 16 teams. 8 of them are returners, 8 of them new, and it's really weird. If half your company is brand new employees, that's not a sign of a great business model, and it's not something that you have a foundation for. So I don't personally like that the Big 12 is going to 16. I think 14 is a great cutoff for a little bit. Now, when you talk Florida State, then you're talking grabbing a couple other ACC schools, grabbing a Virginia, an NC State, a Pitt, and then you talk about, okay, maybe Oregon and Washington. We are getting dangerously close to a wish list that puts the Big 12 at 20 teams. And at that point, you've got to rebrand. It's no longer the Big 12. It's the Heartland Conference. It's the National Athletic Conference. It's got to be something different, and that is coming. I can guarantee you a rebrand is coming. Your Mark has already talked about it. Rebrand is not coming for your Twitter handle, Harper. What is it?
It's just at Harper Mayfield across all social medias, really. I'm the only one, as far as I know, where I at least got to it first.
That is the easiest Twitter handle that you will get. Drake C. Toll, Harper Mayfield. Thanks for making Locked On Baylor your first listen every single day. Come back Monday. We talk, guess what? Expansion, Pac-12, Big 12. Who wins, who loses? Spoiler, it's the Pac-12 who loses. This has been, it always will be, Locked On. Subscribe. Baylor Bears.